Josh Gottheimer said he'd be moderate and bipartisan.
I work with Democrats and Republicans.
He lied. Today, Gottheimer votes with the radical left, putting radical policies and dangerous ideas before our families. Frank Pallotta is one of us. Husband, father, small business owner, and entrepreneur. The son of a nurse and a civil servant, Frank learned early on the value of a dollar, hard work, and giving back. Frank earned his own way through college and always remembers where he came from. That's why today he's paying it forward as a community leader, a mentor, and an advocate for our veterans. With our nation so divided, Frank knows that far-left politicians like Josh Gottheimer are standing in the way of good jobs, lower taxes, and safer communities. Gottheimer had his chance. Time for a change. Frank Pallotta for Congress.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ronald Joseph Lin. It is October 16th, 2020, and you are now watching Real Talk with Ronnie. Here on our show, we only engage in real talk, real news in real time. As you can probably tell from the opening clip, today we have a very special and distinguished guest. Today, Real Talk has the distinct honor and privilege to sit down and chat with Mr. Frank Pallotta. Mr. Pallotta is a businessman, entrepreneur, and currently the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress from New Jersey's 5th Congressional District. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this area, NJCD5 had been in Republican hands for over 80 years until the current Congressman, Josh Gottheimer, flipped it back in 2016. On November 3rd, Mr. Pallotta hopes to flip this seat back to the Republican column, and we are extremely honored to have the opportunity to sit down with Frank one-on-one at his campaign headquarters in Ramsey, New Jersey. Throughout Mr. Pallotta's illustrious career on Wall Street, which spanned nearly 3 decades, he has worked for some of the biggest names in finance, such as Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Credit Suisse. Although Frank retired from Wall Street in 2008, he never retired from caring about his community and the issues that affect Americans. Although Democratic attack ads often falsely link Frank to the subprime mortgage crisis, in reality, Frank was never involved in that debacle while on Wall Street. In fact, Frank did the opposite. Frank tried to help those who were afflicted by the mortgage crisis. In 2010, Frank founded a startup whose sole and main purpose was to implement programs and methods to help affected individuals keep their homes. The series of programs that Frank's startup had created and implemented were so innovative and so helpful to veterans and everyday people that Time magazine even awarded Frank with coming up with one of the 50 best inventions of 2010. Today, Frank hopes to bring his business acumen, conservative principles, and decency to Washington, D.C. This is by far the most important election of our times, and our country is at a crossroads. Mr. Pallotta is a good and decent family man with decades of practical and real-world experience. When good model citizens like Frank run for office, it is inspiring, and it is testament to the fact that good people are still all around us. With that being said, I fully endorse and support Frank's campaign, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. All right, let's get to it. So please enjoy my interview with Mr. Frank Pallotta. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's October 16th, 2020. You are now watching Real Talk with Ronnie. My name is Ronald Joseph Lin. And as you can see from our backdrop and from the opening clip, we have a very special guest. Our special guest has a big name because he's doing big things. Frank Pallotta, thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming on our show today.
Absolutely, Ronnie. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Frank, based on this, I think it's self-explanatory. You are running for Congress.
I am running for Congress, right? Exactly.
So for the viewers, Frank Pallotta is the Republican nominee
for Congress from District 5 in Jersey, which covers Bergen, Sussex, Passaic, and Warren counties. So we're very happy to have you here today, Frank. So Frank, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Well, I've spent the last 30 years here in Bergen County, specifically Mahwah, New Jersey. That's where my wife grew up, and as you know, when she snaps, you jump.
Right.
But I've been here. I raised my boys here. I have two sons, 25 and 27 years old. I was born in Queens, New York, same town as our president.
That's President Trump.
And I went to a New York City public high school there, went to St. John's University, and worked in the financial industry at Goldman Sachs, mostly, and Morgan Stanley for about 28 years. Okay. Specifically in the residential housing industry. And like I said, 30 years ago, I moved to Mahwah, did a startup also while I was here, and now I'm running for United States Congress.
Wow. So based on your bio that I read from your website, you are the second child of 5 children, right?
5 children in 6 years.
Right. Wow, so your parents were busy.
They were busy.
Yeah. And your mom is a nurse, and your father was a civil servant, right?
Yep, he's a toll collector for the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority.
Right. So essentially, you lived the all-American dream. You grew up in a middle-class family. You went to college. You paid your way through college.
I did.
After college, you found yourself a dream job, which afforded you the opportunity to be successful, right? And provide for your family. So on all those accounts, you lived a very comfortable life, and you retired in 2008. So what made you come out of that comfortable life and get into this dirty, seedy world of politics?
Well, some people would think that Wall Street was a dirty life as well. It wasn't. As you said, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about finance, learned a lot about the economy, not just New Jersey and the U.S., but the global economy. My thought was, it's something great to know and great to learn, but as I progressed through my life, including politics, having an understanding of working for a large company, and as I said, I also had the opportunity to do a startup, I think put me in a unique position looking to move into government, specifically Congress. I just don't know if enough people in Congress or in politics overall these days has spent enough time in the private sector to know how the world operates. I think you need to have signed both the front and the back of a paycheck to really understand it. So that's what prepared me when you said a comfortable life and I retired. You know what? I retired from day to day. I never really retired from trying to do something, Ronnie. But I was excited with my startup, and I'm excited in this run for office.
Okay, great. When you got into this race, there were a lot of opponents that wanted to get the primary, or that wanted to get this nomination. One of your opponents was John McCain.
Yes.
Who was the nominee actually in 2018. Right. And I believe the mayor of Montvale was also part of it, right?
Mike Casale was part of it as well.
So there were many people who were vying for this chance to take on Gottheimer. So what do you think it was about you and your campaign that resonated with the primary voters that ultimately got you this nomination?
You know what I think it was? Look, I think everybody who entered the race brought something to the table. I know John, I know Mike Casale very well. Mike Casale is a mayor in Montvale who does a tremendous job as a mayor of Montvale. I had a unique background in that I didn't really serve in any sort of, I was on the planning board in Mahwah, but I didn't really hold any public office. And the man that sits in the White House didn't hold public office. So I think there was a predisposition for the voters to look at me and my background and say, if it worked in the White House, maybe it works here in Congress. But that's just the start. I was in the race for more than a year before even the primary. So people got to know me, but more importantly, I got to know them and I got to know the district. And I think when you look a voter, when you look a constituent in the eye and you tell them what your background is, what your story is, and they look at you and it's very similar to theirs, I think that's really what clicks. So to answer the question, Ronnie, I know that Mike and John and a few others were in the race to try and show that they had what it takes. And I think everyone brings something important to the table. I just think at the end of the day, the voters made their decision, and I was happy with the decision they did make.
Okay, great. So one of the attacks that the Democrats and Josh Gottheimer likes to lob at you is that they somehow like to tie you with the mortgage subprime crisis of 2008, right? However, what they conveniently failed to mention was that in 2010 you actually started a startup that was aimed at helping people who were affected with the mortgage crisis, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that startup?
Sure. Well, to take a step back in what you said, I have heard the subprime attacks for more than a year. And I've never been in the subprime business.
Right, yeah.
So I thought that was very funny.
Yeah.
He pushed risky assets onto veterans and the elderly. I never sold a thing.
Right.
So I'm not really sure where they got that, but, welcome to politics.
Yeah.
What I did, to answer your question, Ronnie, when I left Wall Street and I was looking for something else to do, again, it was the early stages of the mortgage crisis, and there were a lot of people who were struggling. Not just with making their payments, but the volumes and volumes of applications and programs that the government provided to help people get through the crisis and get through whatever their personal situation was. And I knew that would be taxing on some people.
Right.
People were losing their jobs. People were losing their homes. It wasn't just a New Jersey or a U.S. problem. It was a global financial crisis. People like to label it the housing crisis. It was a global financial and liquidity crisis that I mean, unless you were in the middle of watching what was happening down at a Treasury and things like that, you really don't know how close this world was to economic collapse. But when we emerged from it, I think we emerged because we had smart people in both the public and the private sector who came together and really came up with a series of solutions that I think didn't just save the housing market, it saved the global financial system. Right. But when we emerged from that, I knew that there were a lot of people that needed assistance, and one of the main groups that I thought would need assistance were United States veterans.
Right.
And the reason I knew that was going to be a problem is veterans are not typically the group that raises their hands to say, I need help. Right. They're a proud group. Yeah, they're always the ones to raise their hands to say, how can I help? That's exactly right. Yeah. So we put a program together, and we made it easy for them. We made it free for veterans. Mm-hmm. In fact, we made it free for every single homeowner. That's the way we structured the program. Right. And we helped more than 10,000 veterans. Overall, we helped over 140 or so thousand people through the crisis. But yeah. And the veterans was the one that was the most rewarding because, again, we were able to reach out to them with assistance that they didn't ask for, but that we know they desperately needed. And at the end of the day, we won a Time Magazine Award for one of the best inventions.
I was going to mention that. You won a Time Magazine Award for one of the 50 best inventions in 2010.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to make it clear for all the viewers who are watching, Frank never sold any subprime mortgages. He was not involved in that dirty market. In fact, what he did was try to help people who were affected by this mortgage crisis. Mm-hmm. So that's something that the Democrats don't like to say because it's the truth, right?
It's the truth.
But now it's out there, right?
And you're the one to break that story, Ronnie, so thank you.
Sure. Okay, so what are some of the key issues that you want to focus on in Congress?
Sure. Well, one of the main issues last year when I got into the race that I looked at were taxes.
Okay.
We are the highest taxed state.
Right.
We are, I believe, the highest taxed district in the highest taxed state.
Right.
So we're pretty much at ground zero from a property tax standpoint. So it was really about trying to figure out a way to help our residents in the 5th and New Jersey overall with that tax burden. Mm-hmm. And I know my opponent, Josh, for years, his lawn signs say lower taxes, Jersey values. I believe he's brought neither to the table. But he's really done nothing as far as taxes. Right. And so I would really look for an opportunity, working with the tax code, working with the president, because I think you really can't be looking to impeach the president and asking to work with him at the same time. Right. So that really was the first thing I was looking to do. What we've seen, Ronnie, over the course of the last few months, clearly with this pandemic and what's gone on, is this has turned into an economic crisis from what was initially a health crisis. We're certainly not out of the woods yet, but we've looked at hospitalization rates, ventilator rates, death rates that have more than flattened. Even though we're seeing a spike in COVID, we're not seeing a spike in hospitalizations at all. So what this has turned into is an economic crisis. So my initial thoughts when I get into Congress is to try and get this state opened up.
Right.
There's a lot of ways that we can open up this state. And quite simply, once you begin to open up the state, you begin to open up commerce and revenues, tax revenues start coming in. Mm-hmm. So when tax revenues start to come in, the need for stimulus packages begins to become diminished. Right. And that's really how you have to start to work out of this. If you want to just be in a position where you're constantly looking to the government for stimulus package after stimulus package, you're only doing that because the governor doesn't want to open up the state, both in New York and New Jersey, and Congressman Josh Gottheimer refuses to confront the governor to say, hey, you know what? This is about making sure my people are in a good spot. How do we work to get this opened? He won't stand up to Nancy Pelosi, and he doesn't stand up to his governor.
Right. Well, Josh Gottheimer, when he ran for Congress, he billed himself as a consensus builder, right? Mm-hmm. Someone who would work on both sides. And since he's been in Congress, I guess for the past four or so years,
right?
Has he been that? Or
No,
has he been
no.
the opposite?
No, he's been the opposite. He likes to say he's the moderate
Right.
because most people won't challenge you when you say you're a
Right.
moderate or you're left or you're right. He's been saying he's moderate simply because he is a congressman in a district that is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
It's certainly a Republican district.
Right.
Josh is not a moderate. He's not in the middle. He's not bipartisan. Josh Gottheimer votes with Nancy Pelosi 97% of the time.
97% of the time. That's not really moderate, huh?
No, that's not really moderate. And I'll tell you that in addition to that, you might say, well, how many times does he vote with the president? He votes currently with the president in the 116th Congressional Congress, which was the last 2 years. 6% he votes with the president. So when you say you're moderate, when you say you're bipartisan, and you like to work with both sides,
Right.
and you vote with Nancy Pelosi 97% of the time, and President Trump 6% of the time,
It's not really
you're-
bipartisan.
No, you're anything but bipartisan.
Right. I mean, when you vote with Speaker Nancy, who is from San Francisco, the most liberal district in the entire country, 96% of the time,
Yep.
you're anything but a
No,
moderate,
that's
right?
correct. And her disdain for the president and anything the president stands for is so obvious.
Right.
And the fact that he stands behind there and smiles and tells people he's a moderate, he's not, and he never was, and he never will be.
Speaking of the president, I do believe that the Democrats have this rabid hatred for the president, and
Yes.
they will oppose everything that he says, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like today, if he were to say that he was against the border wall, it would be built.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And we can see this because, so the Democrats, they had power, right?
Right.
They have the control of the House now, and they impeached the president
Sure.
for a phone call,
Right.
right? And they're threatening to impeach him once more because he wanted to appoint a judge.
Sure.
So I think that's why it's more important now than ever that the Republicans take back Congress,
Absolutely.
right? So I think that's why he needs you there to help him, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So on some of the other key topics like infrastructure, where do you stand on that?
Well, look, our proximity to New York City, again,
Right.
I worked there for 28 years. I know how important it is to make sure that people can get in and out of New York City from our many different entry and exit points. So the Gateway Tunnel, the Gateway Project is key. There are a lot of these crossings that are more than 125 years old. And, we are one seismic event, or we are one, unfortunately, potentially bad event away from shutting down the financial capital of the world.
Right.
So making sure that we're in a position to bring the Gateway Tunnel, and not just that, but within our district, it's important to make sure that we have the ability, especially now that people are working more from home,
Right.
that it's not just the interstate comment, but it's the intrastate commerce
Right.
that we're working on that as well. And that's one of the main jobs of Congress as well.
Okay.
And it's to bring money back to your district.
Right. Democrats and liberals, they want to defund the police.
Yes.
Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, I am firmly behind the police. I've always been firmly behind the police and behind our veterans. And, when Josh Gottheimer voted not just for H.R. 7120, which is the defund the police bill, he co-sponsored it. And, he stands and he pounds the table and he tells the police he stands behind them. He co-sponsored the bill to defund them. And, he had one of the largest unions in the state pull their endorsement from him.
Right.
The NJPBA pulled
And
their
just
endorsement
to be
from
clear,
him.
not only did he didn't just support this bill, he co-sponsored it.
He
correct?
co-sponsored
Right.
it.
Which means he co-wrote it. He came up with it, right?
Right. He has his name both on the top and the bottom
Right.
of the bill.
Okay, so, yeah.
And it was and in addition, Ronnie, to defunding the police, the other critical piece of this, which sometimes gets lost, is he removed qualified immunity from the police,
And
that is
what is that exactly?
It's legal protection for both the officers and their families.
Right.
That if they do their job and they execute their job, and it's proven that they've executed their job properly, they won't be held liable in a civil suit. So it's when you remove from them qualified immunity, you expose them to this potential legal
Right.
burden. And what that does, in my mind, not only does it gut the police, not just from a funding standpoint, but from a legal protection standpoint, what it also does is it begins to take those police officers who 5 years from now may be looking at the academy, they may be
Right.
16, 17,
Yeah.
18 years old right now, their father or their grandfather who may have been a police officer said, it's not the same police force.
Right.
So we might be
It's not
losing-
worth it, right?
It's not worth
Yeah.
it. We may be losing people who may be eminently qualified
Right.
to do that job and they may look for another profession just because of those legal protections being removed.
And I think it also makes it more dangerous for the police officer on the job, right?
No doubt.
Because if they know that they don't have this protection that is that is kind of stripped away, then they might be a little hesitant.
Sure.
In what they do.
Yeah.
And that could ultimately
right. In a life and death situation, you don't want that.
I mean,
it's clear to me that when I went to work for 28 years, I put on, like you did, a jacket, a shirt, sometimes a tie.
Right.
Police officers put on a bulletproof vest, and they put a gun around their waist.
Right.
That's how they go to work. They have all the respect in the world for me. These are the people that will have 100% of my backing. We've been to many Back the Blue rallies. We've sponsored a number of Back the Blue rallies. And when Josh chooses to gut their funding, I think that proves what his true colors are.
Right. Okay, what about Second Amendment? Where do you stand on that?
I am unabashedly a supporter of the Second Amendment.
Okay.
Second Amendment as written,
right.
And not just do I support the Second Amendment, but all the noise that goes around magazine round limitations. We shouldn't have them.
Right.
Red flag laws, we shouldn't have them. Red flag laws, people talk about in theory that being a good thing. I think we've seen with what's coming out now that this Russian collusion, this hoax, was all
actually by the Democrats.
By the Democrats.
They were the ones who actually colluded.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So if you leave up to the government
right.
this opportunity to make sure that you shouldn't have a gun and they're going to take the gun
right.
away from you, that's the same government that created this phony dossier that went after the president. So I'm firmly behind the Second Amendment and will and have the endorsement, the highest candidate endorsement from the NRA.
Okay, wow. Yeah, and if you look at history, not just of the U.S. but of the entire world, those governments that tend to take away your guns are usually the type of governments that will take away your life too.
Well, unfortunately, if you look back at history,
right.
going back more than 100 years, places like Venezuela, Nazi Germany,
right.
it starts with taking away your rights, including your guns. So that's not going to happen here.
It's
not
a
with
gradual
me.
taking, right?
Yes.
First they start with their guns, then they take your house, then they take your liberties.
Sure.
Then you got nothing left.
Right. Liberty is worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Freedom is worth fighting for.
How about pro-life or pro-choice? Where do you stand?
I am a pro-life candidate.
Okay.
And I am proud of it. And it's one of these things that I had the opportunity to hold both of my boys.
Right.
So I came from a slightly different perspective from others, but look, there are lots of options out there in the world. I choose life.
Yeah.
I hope others will choose life, knowing that there are options other than abortion.
Right.
There's adoption. There's other things that you can look at. There's other opportunities that you can go down the road at. But the Democrats have really made it easier for pro-life candidates like myself.
Right.
By you saw in New York this bill that allows a baby to die on the table as long as it's kept comfortable.
Right.
Josh Gottheimer again did not vote for the Born Alive Protection Act, which would protect a child that was born that was born alive in an abortion attempt, and it's unconscionable to me how he could not vote for a bill that provides just minimal care to a newborn infant who is born, who's struggling, who's gasping for air, that they would just let the baby die.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a newborn infant is the one person in the world that needs our help the most, right? And it's ironic that the one person that needs the help the most is not protected.
Yeah, no question.
How about when it comes to Israel?
I am pro-Israel.
Yeah.
I've always been. I work closely with AIPAC. I've got a position paper out that talks about my support of Israel.
Right.
I've been very outspoken in opposing BDS.
Okay.
And that's very important because that doesn't have an overt look.
Right.
Of
Can you explain what a BDS is?
Yeah, boycott, divestitures, and sanctions.
Okay.
That's something that we've seen the UN and other countries start to use this BDS angle to try and promote sanctions and to economically cut off countries that don't conform to a set of guidelines that they set forth. And in my mind, having a background in economics and in finance, if they're allowed to do that to Israel,
they can do it to a lot of places.
They can not just do it to not just do it to a lot of places, but when you cut off a country globally and economically, you can ruin them for decades, for more than a generation.
Right.
And that's the problem, is that they've decided that, in my mind, people who want to look to take down Israel, now they're looking to take them down in unconventional methods.
Right.
You've gone from car bombs, you've gone from shootings, now you're looking to take them down economically. And to me, there's no difference.
Right.
If you're looking to take down Israel in any form, I will stand with Israel to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. Okay. And after all, Israel is our only ally in the Middle East, right? It's been our closest ally, and we have to be, faithful to that country. Okay. What do you think of President Trump's handling of the COVID-19 crisis?
Look, I think with the information he's had
Right.
from the very beginning, he's done the right thing.
Right.
People are going to,
he was the first one to come out and say there should be a travel ban on China, right?
That's exactly
right. And when
right.
he did that, Biden came out and said he was a xenophobic person, right?
Right. He was racist
Right,
and
yeah.
xenophobic. Nancy Pelosi told people, you shouldn't
Right.
listen to the president and you should go out to a Chinese restaurant.
Right.
So I think the president did exactly what he did given the information he had in front of him. Like
Right.
you said, he was the first to ban travel to China. He also, as this thing progressed, Ronnie, he made, in New York and New Jersey, which were hit the hardest,
Right.
he made available the USNS Comfort and the Jacob Javits Center.
Right.
In a blink, he turned those into makeshift hospitals that, by the way, the governors of New York and New Jersey did not use. So
Yeah.
the president did what I believe he had to do,
Right.
and that's what happens, Ronnie, when you have a senior executive or a leader or a legislator in a position where they've been in the private sector and they've managed through crisis, and that's important to note.
So you mentioned those makeshift hospitals that the governors of New Jersey and New York did not use. Did you think they didn't use them because of political reasons, purposes?
No question.
Yeah.
People were dying. They were stacking up
Right.
bodies, and there were thousands of beds available.
Right.
And I think that the governor of New York, the mayor of New York City,
Right.
I think even people like Josh Gottheimer and the governor Phil Murphy here in New Jersey, if they use them. If people were able to have, the opportunity
Right.
to be on a ventilator, if they had the opportunity to be in a clean environment, as opposed to, when Josh and Phil Murphy had veterans sent back to facilities, they would then have to say to the president, hey, thank you very much.
Right. And they don't want to have to be on camera saying thank you, right?
Right, right. And they didn't want to have to be the one that, even if they didn't say thank you,
Right.
the president would say, hey, we made the Javits Center available for you.
Right.
They hate the president so much, they're willing to let people die to not
That's
give him credit.
unconscionable, really.
It
right?
really, Ron, it really is, and it's one of the reasons I'm running. Also,
Right.
is if you're not looking at what's right for the voters and the people in your residence, then you're in the wrong job.
How about healthcare? Where do you stand on healthcare?
Look, healthcare, it's probably the biggest issue now, overall, in terms of the optionality, the different options that you take to try and fix it. Healthcare, I think, taking a quick step back, the healthcare problems was never about health. It was never about care.
Right.
It was about insurance. It was about affordability. It was about the ability to find the insurances that are right for you. It's about looking to take away those parts of the healthcare plan, those parts of the program within Obamacare,
Right.
like the individual mandate, which
is dismantled now. I mean, that's the biggest part of
That was the biggest
of
part.
the ACA that's been taken out.
yeah. And when people come at the president and say he wants to gut Obamacare. I mean, Obamacare is this thick.
Right.
And we know Nancy Pelosi wanted to sign it before she read it,
Right.
just to make sure. But there are parts of everybody's health care proposal that works, and there are lots of parts that
Right.
don't. So this is where, Ron, I think you've got to get people sitting at the table together to not say, hey, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican,
Right.
let's use my plan or yours. But one of the bigger issues I think that is important when it comes to health care are, under Obamacare, health insurers' profits have gone up, I think, 4, 5, or 6-fold under Obamacare.
Right.
So the biggest beneficiary of Obamacare are the insurers. And that's the problem. The beneficiaries should be the doctors and the patients,
Right.
and bringing down the walls, making it more a free market enterprise where you bring down the state borders and you let people be able to shop in more of an exchange that's not a government pushed or a government-sponsored exchange is important to do that.
Yeah, because, I mean, as I see it, government health care is like a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. And as you said, our healthcare is a very complicated thing, right?
Right.
What works for you might be different than what works for me, than what works for someone else. So I think it's important that healthcare should first and foremost be something that's handled by the state, right?
Yeah.
And I think the state would have a better control
Yeah.
and better hold on what to put in the healthcare bill.
Sure, no
Yeah.
question.
Okay. How about for Supreme Court nominee? Do you think President Trump did the right thing in nominating Amy Coney Barrett? Or do you think he should have waited until after the election, as the Democrats say?
No, look, the president did what he had to do in according to the Constitution.
Right.
And every president has done the same thing.
Every
when somebody
president.
said, and by the way, the president has the option. The fact that the president did it, and whoever, God, in some debate they said somebody 150 years ago, pre-Lincoln, didn't.
Right.
That's their option not to.
Right.
Then people said that Obama didn't do it. The reason Obama's nominee didn't go forward 4 years ago,
they didn't have control of the Senate.
They didn't have control of the Senate.
And the thing is, if Democrats were in the position that the GOP is in today, they do exact same thing.
That's right. And you when you do what the Constitution tells you to do, this is clearly a power grab. And as you said early on, the left hates the president.
Right.
If the president basically said, hey, you know what, I think I'll wait, they would have said, aha, he's waiting. We want to push somebody forward. But I think she's a great candidate.
Right.
I think all the presidents...
Very qualified, right?
Very qualified.
Very qualified. I think no matter what the president does, the Democrats are going to pounce.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And I think the president would be dumb to not appoint someone. It's his constitutional right.
Sure.
And it's not, the Democrats say it's a power grab, but no, it's within his constitutional right to do this. So it's completely fine.
Right. And look, it wasn't that long ago that these Supreme Court nominees, you'd see them, almost unanimously.
Right.
And it wasn't that long ago that you saw Scalia and you saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right.
It was almost unanimous.
Justice John, Roberts, he was confirmed pretty much across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about, these approvals along party lines. Right. And it's terrible because Amy Coney Barrett, and I'm sure even people that the left would bring up as a potential candidate, eminently qualified judges.
Yeah.
They're the smartest people that our country has. So it's just terrible. The divisiveness is bad, but when you do what's in the confines of the Constitution, you can't be held anything except upholding the law.
Yeah, and those who say that he's doing, something bad or not legal, they're just lying.
Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
just lying. Okay, so this district, the 5th district, as I stated, contains Bergen, Sussex, Passaic, and Warren.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2016, when it was Congressman Scott Garrett, right? Mm-hmm. This district was, they had more registered GOP voters than Democrats, I think, by 2000, right?
Right.
Now, the Democrats have a surplus of around 17,000 voters, right? So, but it's pretty much still an evenly divided state, or district in terms of R and D, right?
Right.
So, what is your message to the independent voters, to the undecideds, as to why they should vote for you and not for Gottheimer?
Well, look, undecided or unaffiliated are there for a reason. They want to take in all the information, and they want to make their decision. They typically make their decision right around now, in the last few weeks of an election. So why should they vote for me? I think I represent the district a lot better than Josh Gottheimer. This is a wealthy district, but it's not generational wealth. Right. We're not talking about Greenwich and other areas of the country.
This isn't old money, right?
Right. This is both parents' work wealth. This is, the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., get the kids ready for school, student loans have to be paid wealth. So that's where I came from. That's where I am. I've been here for 30 years. I raised my family here. I do think it's important, especially in a district like this and its proximity to New York City, that if you've worked in the private sector, particularly in the financial services industry, that's key. Because we know, as we talked earlier, Ronnie, taxes are a big deal. Infrastructure is a big deal. Housing and homelessness are a big deal. Veteran services are a big deal. I bring all of those to the table. I've had 28 years in the private sector. Josh has had his last 28 years in government.
Right.
Career
politician.
Yeah, he was a politician. And you know what? We talked earlier about what moved me forward in the primary. It was the fact that I was a businessman and not a politician.
Right.
And I think with the to give the independents a snapshot of who I am, I'm someone who is looking to be in this district and stay in this district, irrespective of the title. I think Josh is looking at this role in Congress as a stepping stone, and for me, this congressional position is a cornerstone for me.
Right. Okay, speaking of Scott Garrett, so this district, the 5th district, has been reliably red. Well, prior to Gottheimer, it had been read for the past 70 plus years.
Yeah, 84 years, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the last Democrat to hold this seat was Percy Hamilton Stewart from 1931 to 1933. So given all that, why do you think Scott Garrett lost in 2016? I mean, and if you recall, in 2016, President Trump actually carried this
Yep. He carried by a little more than a percentage point.
So given all that, how did Scott Garrett lose?
You know what? I mean, again, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
I think you look at all the different factors that come into play, and I'm not going to try and tear apart an election as to what someone did or what they didn't do. But I will tell you, Josh Gottheimer went after a good, principled, religious man. He went after him hard. He went after him. There were a lot of allegations that were untrue.
Okay.
And Scott Garrett, again, like I said, he's a man of God. He's a principled man.
Right.
He's a brilliant fiscal conservative. And I think he felt as though the district wouldn't fall for the lies that Josh Gottheimer was throwing. He's throwing them at me as well, as we talked about early on. But I think that's why they won. That's why Josh beat Scott Garrett. Is Scott Garrett wouldn't fight the lies, because he thought that the people wouldn't believe the lies, and unfortunately that was the case.
Are you a fighter?
Oh, I'm a fighter. I'm from New York.
Yeah, you're from Queens, right?
I'm from Queens. And, again, spending the number of years I did in the financial industry on Wall Street, it basically prepares you for things like this. People have been coming after us, Ronnie, on Wall Street for 30 years. We were involved. I'm sure we were responsible for the Kennedy assassination. We were responsible for Bigfoot.
For everything and and anything, right?
Exactly.
Where were you during 9/11? Were you on Wall Street during that time?
I worked at Credit Suisse,
which
was halfway between Midtown and downtown, and I remember the day well. A couple things kind of stand out in me, and we were on the trading desk, and when we first saw the plane, we first saw the World Trade Center and the smoke coming out of it, everyone around, I think,
it was kind
around
of surreal,
the world,
right?
It was surreal, but we thought, a plane was, geez, a plane hit.
Right, like it was like some accident.
It was an accident.
Right.
And, there were some pilots that I knew who weeks later told me, you don't hit a building square on like that by accident. And we were all literally watching the screen and doing our jobs when the second plane hit.
Right.
And in a blink.
That's when you knew this was something more.
The world changed. And that was it. And I'll tell you another interesting point. As I said, we were about 4 miles north of the World Trade Center. And our building, pretty large building, but the plane had to be flying pretty low.
Right.
Our building shook when the plane flew over it. And
so
it
you
wasn't.
Could feel it.
You could feel it, but we didn't know what it was. I think everyone thought to themselves, what was that? And it wasn't for another 10 minutes or so that you started to see it on TV that you went back in hindsight and said, that sound that we heard was the plane over our building.
What we just saw, right?
Yeah.
I remember on 9/11. At that time, I was still in college. I was at Brandeis. I believe I was a junior.
Okay.
And I was getting ready for class. I was like brushing my teeth. I was watching the television, and I saw this, and I was like, wow, what is going on?
Yeah.
Right? And in a blink of an eye, I think the entire world changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, and we knew it. And look, it there are still days that you look up at planes in the sky and you think, what's happening, what's going on. A few years earlier, just to kind of take a few steps back, I worked at Goldman when they tried to take down the Trade Center with a bomb in the basement.
Right.
And of course, everyone now is looking, and they put all the borders around. You can't drive a truck into the garage.
You were in Goldman. You were in the office building when they had this threat.
It was a World Trade Center threat, and I was at 85 Broad.
Okay.
So when we saw that happen, when you knew that happened, the whole world, downtown Manhattan and Manhattan overall, they started to watch trucks going into garages.
Right.
And just a few years later, the attack came from above.
Right.
So we have to be diligent, and it goes back again to Josh Gottheimer's view to defund the police.
Right.
We have to make sure that we are funding them and overfunding them.
Right.
Because we need to be sure we're on our guard. As we said earlier, we're the financial capital of the world. So we are a badge for somebody looking to take this country down.
Right.
So we have to be diligent 24/7.
So that brings us to the military. What are your thoughts? Do you think we should overfund the military too and give as much as we can?
We should give as much
of
of the look for the same theory, Ronnie,
Right.
that we think that I believe our police need to be backed and need to be funded. We need to be the best and the strongest military force the world has ever known. We've always been that way. We need to be that way. There was a period of time where we saw the funding come off before Ronald Reagan came into play, and then you saw again through the Obama administration they began to take funding away from the military, and it was Donald Trump's view, just like it was Ronald Reagan's view, that we need to fund our military.
Peace through strength, right?
Peace through strength, exactly.
Okay. Now, how about we move on to some fun questions?
Okay.
Some questions for the voters to get to know you, not just as a candidate, but as a person, right?
Okay. I think I need water for this one.
I'll take a little sip, too. Before we go to the fun questions, we were talking about controversies with the campaigns, right? So I noticed that there was one controversy that came up with the Gottheimer campaign in which there was an ad where they depicted you in this kind of this dark shadow, right? That kind of made you look like maybe you were associated with the mob or something, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Look, I take issue regardless of nationality
Right.
when someone takes advantage, whether it's black or Hispanic or Italian or Jewish. When you attack somebody for who they are and not for what they stand, that's a problem. But he did that. He came out and he decided there's really not much to attack me on.
Right.
My personal, my career, my personal career, I've done well. I've helped veterans. I've helped people. So, what Josh, I think, likes to do is find what he believes will stick, just like he did with Scott Garrett. And he decided, let's make Frank look like he's part of the mob. Right. So he came out with 2 or 3 different. In fact, he came out with a commercial.
It was 2 or 3.
Oh yeah, there was a print ad that he put out. There's a commercial that he just put out where I'm actually walking with a councilman in my district, knocking doors and working with voters and talking to voters. And he turned that picture into a grainy FBI surveillance-looking picture. And it's a dirty, dirty tactic that people don't have to do. But my personal thought on this, there are more Italians in District 5 than any other nationality. There are over 200,000. If he wants to play that sort of a game against a nationality that is the number one nationality, he's got to do it at his own peril.
Right. It's not a winning strategy.
It's not a winning strategy. But when that's all you have, you throw anything against the wall.
When that's all they have, I think that bodes good news for you.
Yeah.
We all know that running for office, it's a big stress, not only on your mental state, but on your physical state, right? You got to go from door to door. I believe in this district there are how many towns? Like 70 plus?
There are 70. There are over 72 towns across all 4 districts. Yeah.
Right. So you got to canvass and go from town to town and meet the voters and go door to door. And on top of that, you got to deal with all the mental stress from the fake news, from the attacks. Given all this, is it worth it? Would you do it again?
Oh, my God. I do it 100 times over. If you have the opportunity to help somebody like we talked about earlier with veterans, you do it. You do it because you feel good. You don't do it for a slap on the back. You don't do it because it looks good on a resume. You do it because it feels good here. I watch my mother and father. They're both with me. They worked... the both of them, they worked hard. They kept their head down, and my family, my brothers and sister and I, we never thought about food on the table. We never thought about clothes on our back. My parents did what they had to do, and they never looked back. I feel the same way about this job. You say all the stress, all the stress. I worked on Wall Street for 28 years. We had our fair share of stress. There are parts of this stress that are very similar to the financial markets, and that is you never know what's going to happen in the markets, and you never know what's going to happen in politics. Like we said, when Josh decides to attack me for being Italian, he does it at his own peril, but you have to be able to react and deal with it. But to answer the question, it's the best thing I've ever done. It's the best thing, and I want to take what I know and bring it to the people of the 5th. And when I get to Washington, you're not just helping the people in the 5th. You're helping the people in the state, and you're helping people across the country.
Right. Okay, so now let's move on to the fun questions.
Okay.
So, Frank, your favorite movie?
Josh Gottheimer knows this already. It's The Godfather.
1, 2, or 3?
2.
2?
Yep. 3 isn't a real movie. Just saying. 3.
A lot of people crap on 3, but I think 3 is good in its own way, right? It's just misunderstood.
You know what?
I think the problem with 3 is that because 1 and 2 were so good,
that
it's hard for 3 to live up to it. And plus, 3 was made, I think, like 15 years after 2. So I think it's
Yeah, I'd throw my third favorite. My second favorite is 1. My third favorite is probably Shawshank.
Okay.
So those you've got Godfather 2, Godfather 1, and Shawshank.
I'm still waiting for a Godfather 4.
Yeah, you might want to wait for that.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite food?
Lamb. I love lamb.
Okay. Kebab or?
No, just in any form.
okay.
I love the taste of it.
All right.
My wife doesn't like it, so
Right.
I have to wait till I can make her something else so she's not home. But
Okay.
I'm a lamb fan.
Okay. You must love pizza too, right?
I do.
Favorite topping on pizza?
Pepperoni.
Me too. Yeah.
Pepperoni. Does
High
it
five.
slide around?
Yeah. I think pepperoni is like it's the classic, right?
Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
No, you can't. And anybody who puts pineapple on a pizza, I don't
know pizza.
They don't know pizza.
Okay. Favorite sports team? It could be basketball, football, or baseball, or all
the
three.
New York Yankees. New York Yankees and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay.
New York Yankees. My dad, I grew up in Queens, which was tough in the late
Right.
60s to be a Yankee fan.
Okay.
My father taught me to love the sport first.
Right.
And when you love the sport and you love the history of the sport, the Yankees.
Okay. I think some of your team, they're looking at you. They're like, what? Okay. So the election is on November 3rd. What will you do on November 4th, win or lose?
Well, sleep
Yeah.
sleep through. Look, my team is great.
Yeah.
You're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and my campaign manager Kelly Hart has been with me from the beginning. My staff has been with me almost from the beginning. We laugh, we cry, we go out, we talk
Right.
together, we yell at each other. The first thing I think I do on the 4th is we all go out to dinner, we all go out to lunch,
Right.
and we celebrate a year and a half of working together, and then hopefully we're in a position where we can start to turn the country around.
Okay. A few more questions and then we're done.
Absolutely.
What will be your first order of business once you win? I'm not going to say when you win. I'm going to say once you win.
Okay.
What will you do? What will be your first order of business that you do on Capitol Hill?
Most people have said to me, you're going to vote Nancy Pelosi out. That's the first
Right.
thing you're going to do. That's like asking me if I'm going to breathe in the morning when I get up. Right. That's absolutely
Right.
that's a done deal. She should have been gone years and years ago. First order of business, I think what both sides, actually all three sides, the left, the center, and the right, they want to see the arguments stop in D.C.
Right.
We can move together as a country when we're able to talk, we're able to sit at a table like you and I.
Right.
So I think the first thing I want to bring is this notion that the private sector is the private sector because you care about your shareholders, your customers, the environment, the people. I want not just all the residents of the 5th and New Jersey, but I want the other 434 members of Congress to know that we're going to sit together and we're going to work together for the American people.
Right.
So that's the first order of business. As far as my district, as we said earlier, Ronnie, taxes are important. I think infrastructure is important. But I'll sit with the leadership. Hopefully, we've got Kevin McCarthy as my boss,
Right.
and we're able to look at a checklist of what's right for the state.
Okay. Last question, the most important question. When you win, will you promise to come back on our show, this time as Congressman Frank Pallotta?
Absolutely. Some people ask me, and I'm on the phone a lot. I'm on the phone a lot more than my campaign manager wants me to be on the phone with people who call. But you can't forget the voters. You can't forget the people that got you there. And once the voters see that you're not with them and you're not talking to them and you're not doing things like this, that's when you start to lose your grip. And that's what Josh was.
Right.
Josh decided he flies all over the country for fundraisers. Most of the money he raises is California and Washington, D.C.
Right.
He doesn't show up unless he's got a podium, he's got a camera, and he's got a microphone like yours.
And by the way, a lot of the money that Democrats raise are from big banks like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, who they then vilify. So I always wonder, why do these banks keep giving them money?
Because it sounds like the right thing to do. But to answer your question, absolutely, I will come back and do this again.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank.
No, thank you very much.
Thanks for being on our show today. So everybody, election is on November 3rd. Please go out and vote for this man right here. He is the man who is going to flip this district back to the red column. And President Trump needs all the help that he can get. And I'm confident that Frank Pallotta will be the man to help him.
We will, and I just want to say one last thing. As far as voting, we all know, Ronnie, this is a vote by mail in New Jersey this year. We couldn't impress harder on people to make sure that you fill out your ballot and you bring it to your local drop box.
Bring it to the actual drop box. If you mail it in, you don't know if it's going to get there.
Right. So the drop box is important. They are surveilled 24/7. A representative from the Sheriff's Department every single day picks up the ballots. So the safest way to go when you fill out your ballot, hopefully a Republican ballot, is to deposit it in the Dropbox, and you have the ability to track it shortly after that.
Okay, great.
I want to read that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Real Talk with Ronnie. We are once again here with Frank Pallotta, future Congressman from the 5th District of New Jersey. Okay, thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Ronnie. I
And
appreciate
best
it.
of luck on November 3rd, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more.
Definitely.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed our exclusive interview with Mr. Frank Pallotta. If you'd like to learn more about Frank and his campaign for Congress, or if you'd like to find out how you can help Frank win this November, then please visit his campaign website at www.pallottaforcongress.com. Once again, that's www.pallottaforcongress.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Real Talk with Ronnie. Once again, here on our show, we only engage in real talk, real news, in real time. If you think you'd be the subject of an interesting interview, or if you have a worthy story to tell, then please feel free to reach out to us via one of the listed contact methods. Once again, for all inquiries and bookings, please reach us using one of the methods listed on the screen. We hope you have enjoyed tonight's program. Until next time, please take care, stay safe, and God bless.